There's no marketing position in Tokyo, is there? The question sat in the silence of an empty apartment, heavy with betrayal. Miles Griffin stared at the email chain, not meant for his eyes, that revealed months of deception. Everything he'd sold, everything he'd sacrificed, had funded his wife's escape plan, not just with his money, but with his trust. Jasper Lynn stood in the middle of the half-packed apartment, surrounded by bubble wrap, duffel bags, and the echo of a future that had just shattered. The blue light from his laptop screen illuminated his face in the fading San Diego sun, casting a pale glow across the email thread that had just detonated his world. The subject line read, "Final confirmation, Costa Rica property funds complete," but it wasn't the title that made his heart seize. It was the messages between his fiancée, Vivian Reyes, and a man named Caleb Torres. Caleb had discussing how easy it had been to bleed him dry. "He still thinks we're flying to Berlin in 2 days," Vivian had written, her digital voice devoid of guilt. Poor Jasper. He's practically funding our entire future. He just doesn't know it yet. Every message was like a knife twisted deeper, each timestamp a reminder of how long the deception had gone on. She hadn't just lied. She'd planned every step, coordinated with her lover to siphon Jasper's assets under the guise of building a life together abroad. He had sold his condo, liquidated his crypto holdings, even cashed out the tech shares he'd been holding since his first job. All because she said they needed to move on and simplify for their next chapter. He didn't hear her come in. The sound of her keys hitting the counter jolted him, and when he turned to face her, Vivian didn't flinch. No panic, no guilt. Only a practiced calmness that turned his stomach. "How long?" Jasper asked, voice low, trembling with disbelief. "How long have you and he been planning this?" Her gaze drifted to the carry-on beside the door, the same one she'd insisted they keep essentials in. "About 7 months," she said evenly. "It started with an idea, Caleb and I. We saw an opportunity. You were always so generous and distracted. I didn't think it would be this easy." The matter-of-fact tone cut deeper than if she'd screamed. Jasper took a step forward, fists clenched. "You stole everything." Vivian tilted her head, like she was almost amused. "No, Jasper, you gave everything. I just opened the door." She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the hallway, pausing briefly at the threshold. "This wasn't personal, not really. It's just, you were convenient, smart, but not suspicious, loyal." Then she was gone. Just like that. The door shut softly behind her, leaving Jasper alone with silence and loss. He sank to the floor, back against the now bare wall, heart hammering beneath the weight of betrayal. The bank accounts, the fake Berlin job offer, the power of attorney she'd convinced him to sign during that visa paperwork errand. Everything came crashing into focus. She hadn't just conned him, she'd made him complicit in his own downfall. And as the sun disappeared over the Pacific, Jasper knew 2 things for certain. He had nothing left, and he wasn't letting this end here. 6 months earlier, things had seemed perfect. Too perfect, in retrospect. Vivian had returned from a tourism summit in Copenhagen, full of excitement, eyes shining as she told Jasper about a job offer in Berlin with a boutique travel company. Experiences. "They're launching a European hub and want someone with my expertise," she'd said, her voice brimming with opportunity. Jasper, ever supportive, hadn't hesitated. "This is huge, Viv. Of course we'll go," he'd said, already imagining cobblestone streets, cafe balconies, and a quieter life far from the ground. That was the moment it began. First came the gentle nudges. "Let's start by simplifying," she'd suggested. "We don't need the condo tying us down, and Berlin's real estate is a whole new game." Jasper agreed. The market was hot, and the $220,000, 0 cents in equity from the sale, would make a strong foundation. Then came the talk of liquidity. "Stocks take time to transfer abroad," she'd claimed, pressing him to cash out the tech shares he'd been sitting on since his Nextlock onboarding. They were worth over $90, 0 cents, and he did it without hesitation. His crypto sold too, because she insisted European regulations can be a nightmare. She was always thinking ahead, or so he thought. Piece by piece, she dissolved the world they had built. She even convinced him to part with his late grandfather's Omega watch, calling it sensible debate sentiment baggage. That would just slow them down. Berlin is a fresh start, she kept saying. Let's not carry old ghosts. She handled most of the logistics, claiming she had connections with the relocation firm, embassies, and international banks. She was always too busy to share details. But Jasper didn't push. He trusted her. Vivian had a way of making her confidence contagious. A steady hand on his chest. A knowing look when he doubted. Always saying, I've got this. You focus on winding down work. His sister Ari had started raising flags back then. You really okay with her handling everything? She asked during a Sunday call. Jasper brushed it off. She's just better at this stuff. You know I hate paperwork, Ari had sighed. You're the one who works in cybersecurity and risk mitigation. Doesn't this feel off? But Jasper had waved it away. This was love, he'd told himself. And love meant trust. Love meant partnership. Love, it turned out, was her weapon and his blind spot. The apartment was too quiet. With Vivian gone, it felt less like a home and more like a hollow container for memories he hadn't yet had the strength to erase. Jasper sat on the bare floor, knees drawn up, staring blankly at the open laptop still glowing with betrayal. The digital trail she left behind was deliberate Kelset. He'd called the bank that morning, still clinging to the irrational hope that this was some awful misunderstanding. But the woman on the line confirmed his nightmare. Yes, sir. All funds were moved to an international account authorized by your joint power of attorney. That transfer was executed 3 weeks ago. His voice had cracked when he tried to protest. But I didn't mean for that to be real. It was just paperwork. The customer service rep, polite but unmoved, had simply repeated, the authorization was legally binding. And just like that, the final door slammed shut. Everything he'd spent the last decade building. By midday, Jasper hadn't moved. His phone buzzed endlessly, messages from work, from friends, from numbers he couldn't process. It wasn't until the front door creaked open and a familiar voice called out, Jazz, that something inside him broke. Ari stood in the doorway, a duffel bag over her shoulder and concern written all over her face. Jason, you look like you've been hit by a truck. She stepped over a half-packed suitcase and knelt beside him. Did you eat? He shook his head, eyes still glued to the screen. She took everything, he whispered. Even my name's tied to her ghost companies. If anyone looks, it'll seem like I helped her do this. Ari didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside him, let the silence stretch. Finally, she said, You're the smartest guy I know, Jazz. You solve corporate breaches for breakfast. You think someone like her can wipe you out that easily? He looked at her, hollow. I think she already did. Ari's gaze didn't flinch. No, she took what you had, not who you are. You still have that. And you have me. That was the first moment Jasper realized he'd hit rock bottom. But rock bottom wasn't the end. It was a platform, one you could push off from. The next morning, Jasper opened his laptop again, but this time not to cry over emails or reread old messages looking for emotional clues. This time, he opened it like a weapon. His eyes were sunken, his hair unkempt, but there was a different weight in his breath now. Cold, focused. Ari brought him coffee and sat nearby, watching as the keyboard began to click steadily beneath his fingers. He started simple. Vivian's known emails, the shared cloud storage, the calendar they used to coordinate their move. He unearthed encrypted archives, files with vague names like taxprep_Berlin and CT_workshop__workshop__________________________________________________________________________________________________________So far, with some digital forensics for internal breach detection, Jasper decrypted metadata that led him down the first rabbit hole. The name CT Holdings, a shell company registered in Belize just 3 weeks before he sold his condo. A search through financial registries confirmed the signature, Caleb Torres, the same name from the emails. The same man who now owned what used to be Jasper's entire life savings. He didn't stop there. Every time a trail seemed to vanish, Jasper pushed deeper. He triangulated timestamps from Vivian's burner phone with transaction records scraped from a recovery folder she'd never fully deleted. Using pattern detection scripts from Nextlock's open-source toolkit, He traced 5 large transactions moving through a crypto mixer, bouncing between wallets before landing in an exchange based in Panama, one Jasper knew to be a laundering hotspot for fraudulent tokens. He reached out to Maya Chen, an old friend and blockchain analyst who worked at a high-level crypto compliance firm in Austin. They hadn't spoken in 2 years, but when he explained what was happening, she didn't hesitate. "Send me everything you have," she said. "This isn't some amateur love scam. This looks like asset stripping." By nightfall, the living room of Ari's house looked more like a cybercrime unit than a home. Walls covered in post-its, printed bank ledgers, screenshots of chat logs, passport scans, and flight reservations. Ari stared at the chaos and muttered, "This is either a breakdown or a breakthrough." Jasper didn't look up. "She didn't just betray me. They've done this before." There were names, other accounts, other victims. A pattern was forming. Jasper had spent years protecting tech giants from digital thieves. But now he was using those same tools to hunt the people who had stolen his life. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Fueled by adrenaline and evidence, Jasper compiled everything into a clean, professional dossier and walked it into the local police station, expecting at least a flicker of urgency. Instead, he was met with the flat, procedural indifference of a desk sergeant who skimmed the files and said, "This looks like a civil matter, sir." Jasper blinked. "She stole over $400,000. She lied, manipulated documents, used a fake company to launder my assets." But the officer simply handed the folder back. "If you signed the transfers or gave her access, it's a domestic dispute. You'll need a civil attorney." The floor shifted under Jasper's feet. He'd brought blueprints of a well-organized conviction, and they were treating it like a bad breakup. Talia Cho, a sharp-tongued attorney Ari had contacted through her press network, confirmed the worst. "Jasper, you authorized everything, even the shell companies. You signed power of attorney forms she filed with a notary. That's a massive hurdle. From a legal standpoint, you gave her the keys to rob you." He felt his stomach twist. "She said it was for visa paperwork. I didn't read them closely." Talia nodded. "Classic Baton. She probably used ambiguous language. It's not illegal to lie. Not unless you can prove she never intended to follow through from the start." The kicker came when Talia added, "And even if we get it to court, you're funding the fight. She's spending your money." Jasper's despair boiled over that night. He called Vivian. To his surprise, she answered. "You're playing with fire," he snapped. "You won't get away with this." On the other end, her voice was maddeningly calm. "Get away with what, Jasper? You signed the paperwork. You agreed to every transaction. There's no court in the country that'll side with a man who volunteered to be a fool." Then she hung up. He stood there, phone in hand, chest burning with fury. For the first time since this all began, Jasper realized the law wouldn't save him. If he wanted justice, he'd have to make it personal. The morning after the call with Vivian, Jasper didn't waste time feeling sorry for himself. The sting of her voice, so smug and untouchable, had flipped a switch inside him. He emailed his boss at Nextlock, Mr. Halverson, requesting emergency personal leave. "I need time to deal with a breach," Jasper had written. Halverson called him within the hour. "You sound like hell," he said. Jasper didn't deny it. "Breach. It's personal. But it's still a system worth fixing." Halverson paused, then granted him 2 weeks off. "Don't burn anything illegal into our servers, and don't get arrested." Jasper promised nothing. That night, with Ari asleep and Maya online from Austin, he accessed Nextlock's proprietary tracking software, the same suite he had once used to sniff out multi-million-dollar crypto laundering operations for clients in Dubai. Now, it was his weapon of war. He worked in shadows, after hours, always off the clock. Through high-spec anonymized tunneling, Jasper input patterns of transactions he'd already traced. Randomized transfers, staggered amounts, multiple wallet jumps. The software began flagging anomalies, subtle patterns that human eyes would miss, but that Jasper had trained himself to see. One wallet, tied to a Panama-based crypto exchange, had been interacting with the same digital fingerprint every third day. Always around $15,000, 0 cents, split across accounts. That alone wasn't illegal. But when layered with metadata from Caleb's flagged pseudonyms and the known shell companies, the system lit up. He got sloppy, Jasper told Maya during a midnight call. They thought I wouldn't know what to look for. Maya was quiet, impressed. You're building a federal-level case, Jazz. This isn't just revenge anymore. But it was revenge, and retribution, and redemption. With each connection, Jasper felt clarity sharpen like a scalpel. They hadn't just stolen his money. They'd tried to erase him, make him collateral in someone else's life story. Not anymore. With a digital paper trail forming like a noose around Vivian and Caleb's necks, Jasper backed up his findings and sent a secure message to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He included a simple subject line: ongoing fraud, assets laundered, I have proof. 2 days after submitting his report, Jasper received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. Mr. Lin, this is Agent Monroe with the Department of Justice's Financial Crimes Task Force. We need to talk about your submission. Less than 24 hours later, he found himself in a high-security federal office in downtown San Diego, sitting across from a woman in a tailored navy blazer, her badge clipped to the lapel. Agent Monroe flipped through the dossier he'd submitted like it was a menu, stopping at key charts, nodding occasionally. This is extremely comprehensive, she said. You've tracked a trail our own analysts hadn't yet connected. Jasper leaned forward. So you'll arrest them? She hesitated. We're already tracking Caleb Torres. He's been on our radar for over a year. We believe he's been involved in at least 4 international asset diversion schemes under different identities. Jasper's pulse quickened. Justice felt close enough to touch. But then Monroe slid another folder across the table. What you may not know is that Vivian Reyes has been named in 2 of them, once as a co-conspirator and once as a possible victim. Jasper froze. Victim? He echoed, unable to stop the disbelief from tightening in his throat. Monroe nodded slowly. In Miami 5 years ago, under a different alias, she was involved with another Mark of Torres's. The man died, apparent overdose, but we believe Caleb was grooming Vivian even then. In your case, she may have started as his partner, but that doesn't mean she wasn't manipulated too. The idea rattled Jasper. He had built a fortress of anger around the betrayal, and now it was cracking. Could Vivian have been just another piece on Caleb's board? Was her cruelty calculated or coerced? Before he could fully process, a new email arrived on his phone. You think you've won? The subject line read. The body was empty except for a single line. Caleb always lands on his feet. Jasper's jaw clenched. He looked up at Monroe. He knows I'm coming. She nodded. Then we'd better get to him first. The lines between predator and prey were blurring, and somewhere in the middle of that gray, Jasper realized this wasn't just about his money anymore. It was about finishing something far bigger than himself. The trap was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its timing. With help from Maya and Agent Monroe, Jasper created a decoy crypto wallet embedded with a real-time tracker, a honeypot, loaded with what appeared to be a new clean investment, routed through a fake front company registered in Belize. Vivian, who had gone dark for days, took the bait. An anonymous wallet pinged the tracker at 2:16 a.m., triggering the digital flag they'd set. 3 hours later, another transaction hit, $480,000, 0 cents routed to a gold exchange account in the Cayman Islands, connected to a name Caleb had used before. He's trying to make his final move, Maya said, watching the blockchain pulses flicker across her monitor. He thinks no one's watching, but someone was. The DOJ, Interpol, and a financial task force Jasper never imagined he'd be working with. By sunrise, Caleb's location was confirmed through a flagged IP address in Panama City. Within 12 hours, local authorities raided his rented villa. He went quietly, his arrogance extinguished the moment the cuffs clicked shut. Back in Houston, Vivian was caught trying to withdraw funds from a frozen trust account. She was dressed in gym clothes, sunglasses on, hair pulled back, looking more like someone running errands than someone fleeing justice. When they arrested her, she didn't scream or resist. She simply whispered, "He said he had one more play." Hours later, Jasper stood outside the federal building in San Diego, holding the USB Vivian had tried to erase before her capture. It contained logs, passwords, and most importantly, a backup of her communications with Caleb. Jasper read them all. There were moments she was clearly complicit, but there were others, bared between lines, where fear bled through her words. You said we'd be out by now. I didn't sign up for this part. I can't keep lying to him. The manipulation was deep. Jasper couldn't excuse what she'd done, but now he understood why. The fallout was swift. Media picked up the story. Caleb was charged with international wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy across 3 countries. Vivian struck a plea deal in exchange for her testimony and received 5 years. The empire they built on stolen trust had finally collapsed, and standing in the wreckage, Jasper felt neither triumph nor pity. Just closure, cold and clean. The courtroom was quiet the day Caleb Torres was sentenced. Jasper sat in the back, not out of fear or humility, but because he didn't need to be seen anymore. Justice didn't require his presence to be real. It had already happened the moment Caleb was led into that courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled, the smirk long gone from his face. Vivian, too, stood before the judge, hands clasped, expression unreadable. She looked at Jasper once. Maybe she couldn't. Or maybe she knew he wasn't the same man she'd conned. Caleb received 14 years without parole. Vivian's 5-year sentence came with strict restitution terms. Agent Monroe later told Jasper that, with the assets seized, he could expect to recover nearly $270,000, 0 cents over time. Not everything, but enough to start again. But by then, Jasper wasn't waiting on a number in a bank account to tell him he was okay. He already knew. He'd moved out of Ari's house a month before the sentencing. Bought a modest cottage 2 blocks from the ocean. Nothing flashy, nothing to prove. A space filled with light and silence, but the kind that healed, not haunted. He furnished it with care. Second-hand pieces with stories etched in them. A stark contrast to the cold minimalism Vivian once insisted on. In his new life, Jasper took comfort in the real. He'd been offered a promotion at Nextlock, Director of Strategic Intelligence, a role created after Agent Monroe praised the quality of his investigative work. But Jasper turned it down. Instead, he partnered with Maya to build a cyber fraud consulting nonprofit aimed at helping individual victims like himself. People manipulated not just by scams, but by the people they trusted most. Some evenings he'd walk the beach alone, barefoot in the sand, watching the sun fade into the sea. He didn't think about Vivian often, and when he did, it wasn't with rage, just quiet understanding. She had made her choices, and so had he. He didn't need vengeance anymore. He had purpose, he had clarity. He had himself. One Saturday, he invited Ari and Maya over to help hang art in his new home. "You've come a long way from that hollow apartment," Ari said, straightening a framed blueprint of a cyber trail Jasper had once followed. Jasper smiled, setting down a screwdriver. "Turns out rock bottom's a hell of a launch pad." That night, after they left, he poured a glass of red wine and stood in his kitchen, the soft hum of his old record player in the background. He caught his reflection in the window. Not broken, not angry, just whole. Finally, he raised the glass to his reflection and whispered, "Never again." The story of Jasper Lynn is a powerful exploration of betrayal, resilience, and rediscovery. At its core, it teaches that trust, while essential in relationships, must be paired with awareness. Jasper's blind faith in love cost him everything: his home, savings, and sense of safety. But it also forced him to confront the depths of his own strength. The greatest lesson lies not in avoiding pain, but in how we rise after it. Jasper didn't stay broken. He used the very skills that made him a target, his intellect, his empathy, his loyalty, to build something stronger from the wreckage. He learned that emotional manipulation often wears the face of love, and that healing doesn't come from revenge, but from reclaiming identity and purpose. In the end, Jasper didn't just get justice. He rebuilt himself into someone wiser, grounded, and unshakably self-reliant. The story reminds us that even in our lowest moments, we hold the power to rise, not as the people we were, but as the people we choose to become.